You're watching your cousin's kids. My MOM announced right after I arrived for a family retreat. I lost it. Then you can handle the rent alone. I canceled their reservations, hotel, and every payment. They had no idea I was done being their servant. I, 28M, thought I was finally getting the family vacation I'd been craving for years. After working 60-hour weeks for the past 18 months, saving every penny, I'd planned what I believed would be our first real family retreat in over a decade. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was the one funding it entirely. The drive to the mountain resort took 4 hours, and I spent most of it imagining lazy mornings, hiking trails, and actual conversations with my parents that didn't revolve around money or favors. I'd booked a luxury cabin, planned activities, even arranged for a private chef for 2 nights. This was supposed to be my gift to the family, and my chance to finally feel like part of it instead of the family ATM. I pulled into the gravel driveway at sunset, the cabin looking exactly like the photos online. Warm lights spilled from the windows, and I could see figures moving around inside. My chest tightened with anticipation as I grabbed my bags and headed for the door. Mom opened it before I could knock, her face wearing that expression I'd learned to dread, the one that meant she needed something. She didn't even let me set my bags down before she hit me with it. She announced that I'd be watching my cousin's kids for the entire weekend because my cousin and her husband had decided to join us last minute, and they needed a break. She said it like it was already decided, like my opinion didn't matter. The kids were already here, she explained, and everyone was counting on me. I stood there in the doorway, bags still in my hands, trying to process what I'd just heard. Through the windows, I could see my cousin lounging on the couch I'd paid for, her husband helping himself to the premium liquor I'd stocked, while their 3 kids, ages 4, 6, and 8, ran screaming through the living room. I asked Mom when exactly this had been decided, and she waved her hand dismissively, saying it had just worked out this way. She reminded me that I was good with kids and that everyone needed to relax. The way she said everyone made it clear she didn't include me in that category. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion from working myself to death to afford this trip. Maybe it was the realization that even on a vacation I'd planned and paid for, I was still expected to be the family servant. Or maybe it was just 28 years of being taken for granted finally catching up with me. I told her that if I was going to be the babysitter for the entire weekend, then I could handle paying the rent alone too. The words came out calm and measured, which seemed to confuse her more than if I'd shouted. She asked what I meant, and I explained that since they clearly didn't see me as family worth spending time with, just free labor, I was done subsidizing their lifestyle. I told her I'd be canceling everything. The cabin, the hotel reservations for the extended family arriving tomorrow, the restaurant bookings, the activities I'd planned and prepaid for. Mom's face went white. She started backtracking immediately, saying I was overreacting and that we could work something out. But I was already pulling out my phone, scrolling through my email confirmations. The first call was to the resort management. I explained that I needed to cancel my reservation immediately due to a family emergency. The manager was understanding, but informed me that since it was less than 48 hours notice, I'd lose my deposit. I told him that was fine and asked him to have security escort my family from the premises within the hour. Mom was following me around the cabin now, her voice getting higher as she realized I was serious. She kept saying I couldn't just leave everyone stranded, that family doesn't abandon family. I reminded her that family doesn't trick family into being unpaid childcare either. My cousin appeared from the kitchen, demanding to know what was going on. When I explained that I was canceling the trip, she had the audacity to call me selfish. She said they'd already arranged their whole weekend around this, that they'd told the kids they were getting a vacation. I looked at her 3 kids, who had stopped running around and were now staring at the adults with wide, confused eyes. I felt a pang of guilt, but then I remembered that their parents had planned to dump them on me for 3 days without even asking. I told my cousin that maybe next time she should plan her own vacation instead of hijacking mine. The second call was to the boutique hotel where I'd booked rooms for my aunt, uncle, and grandparents. The receptionist was less accommodating, but when I explained it was a genuine emergency and offered to forfeit the deposit, she agreed to cancel. I could hear Mom in the background, frantically trying to call my aunt to warn her. My cousin's husband finally emerged from wherever he'd been hiding, beer in hand, asking what all the commotion was about. When my cousin filled him in, he actually laughed and said I was being dramatic. He suggested I just calm down and enjoy the weekend, that watching kids wasn't that hard. That's when I lost what little composure I had left. I told him that if childcare was so easy, he could handle his own kids for once. I pointed out that I'd spent $3,000 on this weekend, taken time off work I couldn't afford to lose, and driven 4 hours to be treated like hired help. I asked him how much he'd contributed to the weekend, and his silence was answer enough. The third call was to cancel the private chef. She was disappointed but professional, though she mentioned that the groceries had already been delivered and couldn't be returned. I told her to keep the payment anyway. It wasn't her fault my family was a disaster. By now, word was spreading. My phone was buzzing with texts from relatives who'd heard about the cancellations. My aunt was furious, demanding to know where she and Grandpa were supposed to stay now. My uncle sent a long message about family loyalty and how disappointed he was in me. I started packing my bags while fielding increasingly desperate attempts from Mom to negotiate. She offered to pay me back for the weekend, though we both knew she didn't have that kind of money. She promised the kids would be my cousin's responsibility, that I could just relax and enjoy myself. But the damage was done. I could see how they really viewed me now, not as a son or nephew or cousin, but as a resource to be managed. Someone whose time, money, and energy existed for their convenience. The fourth call was the hardest, canceling the family dinner reservation at the 5-star restaurant I'd booked for tomorrow night. I'd been looking forward to that meal for weeks, imagining us all dressed up, laughing over good food and wine. The hostess asked if I wanted to reschedule, and I told her no, that wouldn't be necessary. My cousin was now trying a different approach, having her kids ask me directly why I was being mean to them. The 6-year-old wanted to know if it was because they were too loud, and the 4-year-old started crying. I knelt down and explained that sometimes grown-ups make bad decisions, and that their parents would figure out a new plan for them. My cousin exploded at that, accusing me of traumatizing her children. I reminded her that she was the one who'd brought them on a trip without arranging proper childcare, then tried to dump them on someone else without asking. The final call was to my bank, putting a hold on the credit card I'd given Mom for emergencies during the trip. She'd already used it twice, once at the liquor store and once for gas, without mentioning it to me. When I told her about the hold, she accused me of being vindictive. Maybe I was, but I was also done being everyone's safety net while being treated like an afterthought. Security arrived exactly when they said they would. 2 professional, polite officers who explained that the reservation had been canceled and everyone needed to vacate the premises. My family scrambled to pack their things, the kids crying, the adults shooting me looks that could kill. Mom made one last attempt as I loaded my car. She said I was destroying the family, that this would have consequences I couldn't imagine. I told her the family had been destroying itself for years. I was just finally stepping out of the way. The drive home was the longest 4 hours of my life. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts I didn't answer. By the time I reached my apartment, I had 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. Update 1. It's been a week since what my family is now calling the incident. The fallout has been exactly as dramatic as I expected, but also strangely liberating. My aunt and uncle ended up driving 3 hours to a budget motel that had availability. Grandpa, who's 82 and doesn't handle stress well, had what Mom described as a spell when they told him about the cancellation. They spent Saturday night in an emergency room instead of at the resort. The guilt hit me hard when I heard about Grandpa. I called the hospital directly to check on him, and the nurse said he was fine, just dehydrated and overwhelmed. But Mom made sure I knew it was my fault. My cousin and her family drove home that same night, the kids crying the entire way according to the voicemail she left me. She said I'd ruined their first vacation in 2 years, and that her children kept asking why their cousin hated them. But here's what really opened my eyes. Not one person asked why I'd reacted that way. Not one family member called to ask if I was okay, or what had driven me to such an extreme response. Every conversation was about how I'd inconvenienced them, how I'd overreacted, how I needed to apologize and make things right. My brother, who lives across the country and wasn't involved in the trip, called me 3 days later. He'd heard the family's version of events and wanted my side. When I explained what had actually happened, he was quiet for a long time. Then he told me something that made everything click into place. He said he'd stopped coming to family events years ago because he was tired of being voluntold for things. He'd noticed that every gathering somehow became about what I could provide or organize or pay for. He tried to warn me subtly, but I'd always brushed it off, saying family was important. That conversation made me realize this wasn't an isolated incident. I started thinking back over the past few years, really examining the pattern. Every family birthday, holiday, or celebration somehow involved me contributing significantly more than anyone else. Not just financially, but in time and effort too. Last Christmas, I'd hosted dinner for 12 people, bought all the groceries, cooked for 2 days, and cleaned up afterward while everyone else watched football. When my cousin graduated college, I was the one who organized and paid for the celebration dinner. When my aunt needed help moving, guess who spent his entire weekend loading trucks? I'd been so focused on being the good family member that I'd become the family doormat. The breaking point came when Mom called Thursday night. She'd been giving me the silent treatment since the weekend, but apparently, the family had elected her to fix things. She wanted to know when I was going to apologize and how I planned to make up for the money everyone had lost. I asked her what money she was talking about, since I was the only one who'd actually paid for anything. She mentioned gas money, time off work, and the emotional distress I'd caused. She said my cousin was considering therapy for her kids because of the trauma I'd inflicted. That's when I realized they still didn't get it. They were still viewing me as the problem, not their own behavior. I told Mom that I wouldn't be apologizing because I hadn't done anything wrong. I explained that being family didn't give them the right to volunteer my time and resources without asking. I said that if they wanted to maintain a relationship with me, things would need to change fundamentally. She hung up on me. Update 2. 3 weeks have passed, and the family civil war is in full swing. I've been officially disinvited from my cousin's birthday party next month. Apparently, I'm a toxic presence who might upset the children. The irony of being uninvited to a party I would have been expected to help plan and pay for wasn't lost on me. But something unexpected happened. My brother's wife called me last weekend. She said she'd been following the family drama through my brother and wanted to share something. Apparently, my sister-in-law had been keeping a mental tally of family events for years, and she showed me a spreadsheet she'd created. Over the past 3 years, I'd contributed over $15,000 to various family events, gatherings, and emergencies. I'd provided transportation, accommodation, food, gifts, and labor for dozens of occasions. In return, I'd received exactly 3 birthday gifts, all under $20, and a lot of expectations. The spreadsheet was a wake-up call. I'd been subsidizing my family's lifestyle without even realizing the extent of it. Every time someone needed help with rent, car repairs, or unexpected expenses, I was the first call. But when I'd needed help moving apartments last year, I'd hired professionals because no one was available. My sister-in-law also revealed something that made my blood boil. Apparently, my cousin had been telling people for months that she was planning to ask me to babysit during the retreat so she and her husband could have romantic time. It wasn't a last-minute decision. It was premeditated. Mom had known about this plan and had agreed to it without consulting me. They discussed it at a family dinner I'd missed due to work, and everyone had thought it was a great idea. I was the only one who hadn't been informed about my own weekend plans. Armed with this information, I decided to have individual conversations with each family member. I called my uncle first, since he'd been the most vocal about my selfishness. I explained the full situation, how much I'd spent, how I'd been tricked into babysitting, and how no one had bothered to ask my opinion about my own vacation. His response was telling. He said he understood why I was upset, but that family sometimes requires sacrifice. He suggested I should have just gone along with it to keep the peace. When I asked if he would have accepted being surprised with unexpected childcare responsibilities on a vacation he'd paid for, he couldn't answer. The conversation with my aunt was worse. She accused me of being selfish and materialistic, saying that money shouldn't matter between family members. I pointed out that it was easy for her to say since she'd never contributed financially to any family event. She hung up when I asked her to name one time she'd helped me with anything significant. My cousin's response was the most infuriating. She said I was holding grudges and that her kids were more important than my feelings. She claimed that as the only family member without children, I had more free time and disposable income, so it made sense for me to help out. She couldn't understand why I was making such a big deal about one weekend. I explained that it wasn't about one weekend. It was about years of being taken for granted. I told her that having children was her choice, not my responsibility. She called me heartless and said I'd never understand because I was too selfish to have a family of my own. That comment hit harder than I expected, but it also clarified something important. In their minds, my worth to the family was purely utilitarian. I existed to provide services and resources, not to be loved or valued for who I was. The final conversation was with Grandpa. I'd been dreading it because I genuinely love him and felt terrible about his hospital visit. But when I called, he surprised me. He said he'd been thinking about what happened and wanted to apologize. He told me he'd noticed over the years how much I did for everyone and how little appreciation I received. He said the family had gotten comfortable taking advantage of my generosity and that my reaction, while extreme, was understandable. Grandpa also shared something that shocked me. He said he tried to give me money several times over the years to help with all the expenses I took on for family events, but Mom had always told him it wasn't necessary because I liked doing it and could afford it. I'd never received any of that money. Mom had been intercepting Grandpa's attempts to help me while simultaneously volunteering me for more expenses. That revelation was the final straw. I realized that not only had my family been taking advantage of me, but Mom had been actively preventing other family members from treating me fairly. Update 3. It's been 2 months since the retreat disaster, and my life has changed in ways I never expected. The family drama has mostly died down, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that speaks volumes. The first major change came when I stopped being available for family emergencies. My cousin's car broke down 3 weeks ago, and she called me expecting help with the repair bill. When I told her I wasn't able to help, she was genuinely shocked. She'd become so accustomed to my financial assistance that she hadn't even considered other options. She ended up having to ask her husband's family for help, which apparently was humiliating for her. She left me a voicemail saying I was being petty and that family should help family. I didn't call back. The second test came when my aunt needed help moving furniture. She called and asked if I could bring my truck and spend Saturday helping her relocate. I told her I had other plans. She asked what plans, and I said I was planning to relax and enjoy my weekend. She couldn't comprehend that I might prioritize my own time over her convenience. She ended up hiring movers, which cost her $400. She called Mom to complain about the expense, and Mom called me to guilt trip me about it. I reminded Mom that I'd hired movers for my own move last year because no family members were available to help. She said that was different because I could afford it. The double standard was breathtaking. But the most significant change has been in my relationship with Mom. We've barely spoken since our last phone call, and when we do talk, the conversation is strained and formal. She's clearly waiting for me to apologize and return to my old role as the family problem solver. That's not happening. Last week, she called with what she clearly thought was an olive branch. She invited me to Sunday dinner, saying the family missed me. When I asked who would be there, she listed everyone except my brother's family, who lived too far away. Then she casually mentioned that my cousin would be bringing her kids, and that it would be nice if I could watch them for a few hours so the adults could talk. I couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, she was still trying to volunteer me for babysitting duty. I told her I'd pass on dinner, and she got angry, saying I was being stubborn and holding grudges. I explained that I wasn't holding grudges. I was setting boundaries. I told her that if she wanted me at family gatherings, she needed to stop volunteering my time and resources without asking. She said I was being unreasonable, and that family doesn't work that way. I told her that maybe our family needed to learn how to work differently. The conversation ended with her saying I'd changed and that she didn't recognize me anymore. She was right. I had changed. I'd stopped being a pushover, and she didn't know how to handle it. But here's the thing. I'm happier now than I've been in years. My bank account is healthier because I'm not constantly covering other people's expenses. My weekends are my own because I'm not always helping someone move, babysit, or handle their latest crisis. My stress levels have dropped significantly because I'm not constantly worried about the next family emergency that will require my time or money. I've also started building relationships outside my family. I joined a hiking group and made friends who actually want to spend time with me, not just use me. I've been dating someone for a month now, and she's amazed by how much my family expected from me. She said her family would never dream of treating someone that way. The most telling moment came last weekend when I ran into my cousin at the grocery store. Her kids saw me and got excited, running over to hug me. They asked why I never came to visit anymore, and I didn't know what to say. My cousin looked embarrassed and quickly ushered them away, but not before her 6-year-old asked loudly why Mommy said I was mean now. I realized that my cousin had been painting me as the villain to her children rather than explaining that their parents had made mistakes. It was easier to make me the bad guy than to admit they'd taken advantage of my generosity. That encounter made me sad, but it also reinforced that I'd made the right choice. My family had shown me exactly how they valued me, and it wasn't as a person worthy of love and respect. It was as a resource to be exploited. I miss some aspects of my old family relationships, but I don't miss being taken for granted. I don't miss the constant requests for money, time, and favors. I don't miss being voluntold for responsibilities I never agreed to take on. Most importantly, I don't miss feeling like my only value to my family was what I could provide for them. The retreat weekend that was supposed to bring us closer together ended up showing me the truth about my family dynamics. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable people's bad behavior, even when those people are family. I'm still open to rebuilding relationships with family members who are willing to treat me with respect and consideration. Grandpa and I talk regularly now, and he's made it clear that he values me as a person, not just as a provider. My brother has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. But for the others, the ball is in their court. I'm done chasing after people who only want me around when they need something. I'm done being the family servant. I'm finally learning what it means to be valued for who I am, not what I can do for others. And that lesson, as painful as it was to learn, has been worth every canceled reservation and every angry phone call. Sometimes you have to lose your family to find yourself.